Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'd quite like to do a quick recap of where we've got to. Um, and I think this is going to be, I'm finding in a lot of these videos that I'm doing, I'm getting sidetracked onto lots of different things. And I was planning to get stuck into I call it InDesign generation system, which is rather a grandiose title. It's not an enormous system with lots of tables and charts. It's actually just a very simple die-roll mechanic that generates a little in that we can use. But I think I'm going to be sidetracked on a few things today. So I've got time at the weekend to get stuck into that and give it the justice it deserved. And I've also been reviewing some of the encumbrance rules and the equipment. So I've got some ideas on how to maybe get our heads around things like starting equipment and how the characters should be starting their journey. Probably the main thing I want to do is almost try and make it a bit more realistic, that and posit the notion that the characters have already been adventuring for some time, or it's not, they haven't just started on their journey as adventurers. So a certain amount of their initial wealth, starting money, I'm coming round to the notion that, say, up to 50% of that could be spent freely on equipment without having to do actual shopping, and making, seeing whether things are actually available. So that might cover some of the basics that they need, things like some of their armor, the weapons, some core equipment. But I think I want to go into quite a bit of detail on that, because I'd quite like to see how that works through on the encumbrance mechanic, which I did a little mini game on it. It was actually quite good fun, but I don't know how entertaining it will be to watch. But if I can get my head around that, I'll try and make it as pleasant an experience as possible. First thing I did want to get back to was I actually broke one of my cardinal rules yesterday. If you cast your mind back to Dougal, and when I was trying to work out his level, I made made a fundamental error. I went ahead and did my own dice roll mechanic, and what it should do on any circumstance like that, if you're faced with a question, is it covered in core books? And of course it was covered in the monster manual. So I'm just trying to find my copy. Yeah, here we go. Here's my copy of the monster manual, and if we look at brigands, I don't think I've looked at the entry for brigands as much in my entire life. Mind flayers. Yeah, I'd like to talk about psionics at some stage, because this is interesting. Just as a side note, I know psionics isn't really that popular generally, and we did dabble with psionics in our original campaign, and we found it quite entertaining and good fun. I'd quite like to incorporate, I want to try and incorporate all the rules of Advanced Dungeons and Dragons in the campaign. So I am thinking about having a specific character class that is based on psionics called, what did I call it? A mentalist. Now, I've seen entries in some of the Dragon magazines that kind of define this and almost legitimize it as, and that would be my only deviation from the Player Handbook characters. that would have this standalone class of a mentalist. But no, I'll come back to that at some stage. Let me see. Merchant. Brigand. Okay. Now, under the bandit area, we have, it said, for every 50 bandits, there is a 25% chance that there will be a magic user of 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th level. Roll a 4-sided die per level. So, hey, the rules there. Now, I think I used 4 plus 1 die 3, and we got 7th. Now, looking at our brigands again, let's go back to the page. Iron Shield. We're developing quite a little database now of information. Here we go. Dougal. We said he was level 7. Now, the actual Red Roger is 8. Now, I don't think it is reasonable to have a magic user that is of higher level than the leader. I think it would disrupt the balance. So I'm minded to actually just keep it at the 7, with the view that that is the minimum that we can go to. If we just recap on the situation, it did say, yeah, 7th, 8th, 9th, or 10th. I think that would be too overpowered if we make them at the same. You know, there'd be too much kind of, you know, he'd be almost as powerful as Red Roger. Why can't he just take over himself? At least at 7th, there's this tension that, you know, maybe he's snapping at Red Roger's heels, and he's also got this other guy to worry about, the level 6 fighter. So alarm over, no need to change, but I've got to remember that diktat the next time I come to any of these kind of decisions. 9 times out of 10 it will be in the rules. Go to the rules. Okay, now that I've admonished myself enough, I printed out, now this is my summary of my, almost like my mission statement for the campaign. And this is, if you cast your mind back to my first video, which I have reviewed it, and my goodness, the background music, yes, it was far too high, distracted. I've gone down the route now of less is more, so I've decided just to get rid of that. And if you don't mind me just droning on, I stated some of the guiding principles, and then I had a 9-step, almost like flow chart of what, how do we get from starting the campaign to launching the campaign. So I've got my 9 steps to launch here, and I'd quite like to take this opportunity just to recap on, you know, how many of these can we tick off and say, yep, got there, got enough information, move on to the next step. So with that said, on the campaign development, it said, first guideline, have a starting base for the characters, generate a settlement that will act as the PC's home and safe zone. This should be a large village, small town, or military stronghold. So I would say that that is a tick, because we've got Marchton. Now, we did have to go into a bit of remedial repair action, because I had the vagaries of our random event table, which created basically chaos. It turned a nice, safe, little quiet village into a conflict zone. But the spin-off has been, I think it's paid dividends, because we've had Lord Seward come into our lives. We've had Red Roger running around, Mad Dougal, all that sort of good stuff. So I think that's a success. I put that down to success. And that's one of the beauties of solo wargaming, is that you can have all that kind of vagary chaos going on, and you can still bring it round and view it as a positive. Next one. Have at least one defined place of mystery nearby within the 15-mile starting hex. So I think on that we are there. So if we look at our starting hex, we have the Ruined Palace, which is probably an imperial dignitary of reasonably high status who has had he had a very bad day 170 years ago. Okay, so on that score, I think we can give ourselves a tick. Okay. Generate the starting hex by establishing the dominant terrain. This will be 15 miles and divided into 3-mile subhexes where specific terrain is generated per the Dungeon Master's Guide. Page 173. And again, that's this hex. I just turn it around this way. We've done it. And I don't actually have as a step thing this is our overall Northern Marches area, which again I've had the cartographers work on overnight, and try to tidy up some of our crazy sketchings and markings. It'll never be perfect because this is like a work in progress, but they've done their best to give it a bit of colour and life. So I think on that score, yeah, we can give that a tick. Done. Create the player character's starting party using the tables in the Dungeon Master's Guide, page 175 to 176. Okay, have we done that? I would say yes, almost 90% there, because we've got our 3 characters: Tristan Shadowblade, Fighter Thief, Half-Elf; Dagobert the Holy, Cleric, Human; Lindris Runeweaver, Fighter Magic User, Elf, High. We've got all the statistics. I could flesh out, put some, if it deems it appropriate, I could put the pluses for so things like, I know that 15 gives a +1 hit point bonus, so I could put that in there. That might be the modification I do for that part of the attributes, and then it's to hand. It's and also damage things that he gets. I've got this as a little reminder that he gets something specific on damage and to hit. Alignments are all done. Now, just looking at their alignments: neutral good, lawful neutral, and chaotic good. I don't think there's too much clash there. That's the predominant alignment, lawful neutral, and that represents the main deity that's represented in the area, Bane, god of war. So I wouldn't say neutral good. Chaotic good is probably our furthest away from the position. And remember, we do have a chaotic good minority in the village. So, there could be some potential for either friction and conflict, or maybe alliance later on. But let's not go there just now. We've got all our skills, we've got our characteristics, basically what our general tendencies are like, hit points. We've still got to determine armor class. We've still got to determine our move. We have our spells. With the cleric, we can select any miracle, or that's a CNS term, miracle. Any spell, and take it out once we've memorized it. And the equipment. We've got our gold. Okay, so I would say I'm going to be generous and give ourselves a tick, because you could argue that equipping and working out armor is part of the play process, really. Okay. Next, generate the inn that the characters are based in with a complement of patrons and occupants. Now we haven't done that, but I do, as I mentioned, I do have a system of inn design, and you might say, well, is this that important? Well, I think it actually is, because I'll defend the inn. I know it's down as a bit of a trope, and people laugh at the starting inn, because you know, it is, well, I suppose it's viewed as, when you think of it, what's the famous starting inn? It's like your dungeon master does a big square. He says there's the barman with the bar, and he's looking kind of gruff. There's a table over here, and there's 4 dwarves sitting around, and they're looking very dour. There's a table over here, and there's 3 boisterous peasants making a big noise. There's a table over here, and there's a solitary man with a pointy hat, and then there's a table over here, and there's a man smoking a pipe, the hooded man smoking a pipe, looking kind of broody, and you get the classic, your party's here, you get the classic question from the dungeon master that everybody's waiting for: what do you do? And how many people, you put your hand on your heart, have started out in exactly that situation? And you can knock it and whatever, but I have a bit of a soft spot for that type of thing. And all my generator does is it basically describes the occupants, and it gives them some very vague motivations, but it's really down to the reaction dice of how you interact with that. And I've also used it as a seeding for any missions. So if we do have a mission, say the first one is tied with this place of mystery that we're going to look for, that's where it's seeded. So that's all I'm going to talk about the inn just now, and I'm going to defend it with my my rules. Okay, so we haven't done that yet, so we'll leave that. Establish the first adventures and missions using the adventure generator in the local and surrounding area. Now this I won't come to yet, because I don't really want to talk about that yet. For my own campaign, I did have an adventure generator. So I had about 3 or 4 different missions, which almost like in the inn were posted like rumours. So, and they would be assigned to patrons in the inn. So there's one designated type of occupant who is called a patron. It's a bit like going back to Traveller. You have a patron, and they are sitting in the Star Bar, and they come over and they say, we want, they represent a big mega corporation. They say, we want you to do some counter surveillance type activity. Come and see me in my office type stuff. So it's the same kind of idea, but in a fantasy context. So we'll come back to that. So I'll just put a wee circle there. For the initial adventure, perform a delve into the local place of mystery as the first mission selected. So that makes it easier, because that's what we do. So we will go to we'll summon up the courage. We might even, because I've noticed we do have quite a lot of money, we might even approach the local mercenaries. Now, there are the Seaward's host billeted in this village. So I haven't really thought whether we could approach Seaward or his lieutenant and see whether we could hire out some of his men. or whether there are some actually non-aligned mercenaries in the village. It's probably a bit unlikely that that is the case, but you never know. So there might be a couple of guys that we could get as help, and that would bump us up to 5. And also, I was thinking, I noticed this was always a funny thing in the Joy of Wargaming's stories. He almost immediately got his party to buy dogs, and I never thought of that before. He had war dogs, and he had, I don't know, was it war dogs? You can get a war dog and just a normal dog. And I thought, actually, Dagobert, he's got husbandman skill. Maybe he could train a dog, and the war dog would be really useful, because I think it's got maybe even a couple of hit dice. So that's something to come back to when we consider the overall party side to do the adventuring. And I think I need that kind of ballast to keep these people alive, because otherwise they're going to get squashed by these bricks and the tricks and traps, or end up down a chute. Yeah. And we've got a bit of a relationship with these people now. We want to nurture them through, at least through to 2nd or 3rd level. So that's just a thought, I think. Okay, so we'll put that as a to be done. And then this is all into the future. So once the party has completed their first adventure, the campaign should develop organically with selection of missions from the adventure mission pool in the inn and from settlement inhabitants. Now that's just a grand way, a fancy way of saying that it just grows arms and legs by itself. So it's a bit like what I've been doing. I've just been rambling away, going down different tangents, but I think that's part of the joy of it. You just end up going down avenues. You don't have to be on some almost what's the word? It's almost like a kind of a ladder, and you're having to keep on progressing step by step by step. You could veer, you can jump off the ladder, and you can go off and maybe fall down a snake and come off another ladder. Let's use the snakes and ladders as an analogy. You don't have to keep go in a logical sequence. I think that's part of it, and it is your campaign. So remember, I said do what you want. So that's still to get done. The other thing that we've got to consider, and this is where I'm going to touch on some of my other rules, like weather. And just it's the calendar system to govern the passage of time in the campaign. Now, from reading and watching a lot of the old school kind of old school role playing pages, they are very tight on this time management, and I agree that you've got to have some form of time management. I'm not 100% in favor of doing this real time. Actually a passage of one day is the same in the real world as it is in the fantasy world. I think that's maybe just a bit too strict. So what I'm proposing is a wee bit more flexibility around that, so you can actually go into the future a bit, but not too much. So advance this in line with the passage of real time. So yeah, fair enough, that's kind of moving forward. Start new character parties to fill in for downtime and gaps. Use interactions as discoveries to shape the campaign and develop the world setting. Yeah, these are all good things. But on the time thing, I think we need to have a session on that. I did for my own. In fact, I was even for my own campaign. I was thinking, should I just use a simplistic like month that's based on 4 weeks of 7 days, and you just keep on having that repeating, or should I have a more nuanced one that's got 31 days, basically like our calendar? Or should I use the Greyhawk calendar? I'm not entirely sure yet what's the best. I've currently operating on this 7 day week, 4 week month type thing. And also, what season do you want to start? Now, this is important because this campaign is set in Northern Europe, and if I started now, which is January, or yes, it's still January, if it was based on my climate, which is in Scotland, the characters would be spending most of the time with pouring rain or snow or strong winds. It would be absolutely miserable. So you've got to be careful what starting date you apply. There was a reason in European conflicts why they only fought during the summer months. So there was a campaigning season. But during winter, they would get into winter quarters and not fight. Same's probably going to apply for characters. So that's something to think about, isn't it? Okay, I think that's enough of that. Oh yeah, this was an interesting topic that I wanted to talk about. When I was talking about when I was writing out the character sheet, and I found this very therapeutic. This got me thinking. I thought that's the way I want to go with this. I really want to bring it back, almost like the aesthetic, have an old school aesthetic. So everything is hand drawn. It's longhand. Avoid any technology. Don't bother with all this fancy screen art. So I'm not going to show you a floor plan of a castle, or a fancy one that I've got off the internet. Just imagine you're being transported in a time machine and you've ended up in 1979. That's the technology. That is the challenge, the technology that you've got to play with. I'm completely bought into that approach. So there's nothing fancy. I'm going to say there's nothing fancy on this channel. It will stay. Analog. I'm not digital. I have not been digitized. I'm an analog kind of guy. Right. So that's another ground rule that we can see whether I have achieved at the end of this process. What else was I going to? Oh yes. On the terrain, I thought I wanted to make a ruling on this. Right, I've got, see, these are classified as desert, these purple hexes. Now I've done them purple because that's supposed to represent purple heather, because that's what I think I want this to be. I want this to be moorland. So I have been looking up on the internet just what the equivalent of a desert would be in Northern Europe. And let's say we just base this campaign as being kind of centered on Northern England, Scotland, as being if you imagine a place, that's it. So say for an American audience, if you've ever seen Outlander or Highlander, it's that kind of idea, but it also has some more arable English type, almost like Hobbiton influences in it as well. So it's a combination of that. That's the way to imagine it. We're kind of more into the extreme Highland aspect on this map, and also the surrounding territories, which I think it's almost like we've got the Cairngorms, which is the mountain range. It's kind of like that. Although there's a big forest here, which is probably a bit more gentle. So that is what was it? That is the definition of these purple hexes. Moorland, which is also probably of a higher elevation, so that helps. It has a peaty, acidic soil, so it's you can't really grow crops there. So it's marginal land. It's land that's not really used. So the people from Hawksmoor, they're really there for a reason, because it's defensive, and they've found a good defensive ridge that they have probably a watchtower on, but maybe the actual village itself is more nestled in a kind of a little valley, so that they don't get, if the prevailing wind is, say, west, they don't want to get all this contamination blowing directly into them all the time, because this is the front line, really, when you think of it, these hexes. So they're probably nestled in a little valley, and they have a watchtower, say, on the hill. So I can build that into the description. On the scrub, which is this orange hex here. Now, for Northern Europe, scrub is a transitional habitat where grassland and meadow changes into woodland. It contains shrubs, bushes and trees and grasses. So that's like low shrubs and dwarf trees. So that's the way to view it. It's kind of almost like little shrubs and trees and dwarf trees. And so it's still got foliage, and it still looks okay. You know, it's very rugged, though. It's probably quite difficult to get through. So take away this view that these are blasted and ruined like these. They're probably more probably more attractive for a start. They're not devastated regions. So there's things you can do, some hunting there. Probably there's we have up in the Highlands, in the moorlands, some grouse that you could maybe, I don't know, use a crossbow on it. We shoot them with guns, but you could probably use a crossbow or a bow. Okay, so I thought that was useful to talk about and almost get a ruling on, because I know that's been an issue. The desert keeps on. Oh yeah, and yeah, the other thing on the desert, it can actually be salt marshes. So it's anything. The desert is defined as anything that doesn't have almost like water. So salt marshes. So there you get your desert marsh combination. So maybe it's not as crazy having a desert next to a marsh. Okay. Right, the last thing I want to talk about today is something that came to mind when we were doing that exercise on the historical, the event, the Wizards' War, and we had what was it? Did I write down? Yeah. I've written down some world lore. So just as a recap, 170 years ago, we had a great cataclysm. The Empire of Acheron, lawfully of alignment, is ruled by a council of 13, the archmages, necromancers, and warlocks. It's an evil Roman Empire culture dominated the entire region with its iron grip. Whereas the disease developed magics of mass destruction, there was a rift in the council, led to balkanization, and that came to a head. The escalation to an apocalyptic exchange and mass destruction. Fall of the empire, destruction of culture, rough hexes, previous centres of power, stronghold and mages. Prior knowledge is now lost and forgotten. So that got me thinking, because one aspect, with the setting, we've done all the geography. We're kind of mapping out the geography. So that, in terms of, think of Einstein and his time-space continuum, that it represents the space dimension. So we're doing all the kind of the mapping, the geography, this type of stuff, working out where lakes are and villages and all that good stuff. What about the time dimension? And this event got me thinking about, there was two things I started thinking about. First of all, remember Lyndris. Now look at Lyndris. Look at his age. He is 180. Now, just imagine back to a 10-year-old Lindros, and he's standing on the like a balcony of his tree habitat, and he sees in the southeast in the sky this glow and flashes, and he says to his father, Papa, or something like that, whatever he says in Elvish. What is that? And his father, in a kind of profound, his father goes all kind of Elrond on him, and says in a kind of profound way, the world of men burns in the fire of its own pride. And Lindros is so moved by this statement, and it's so monumental in his development, because not only does that, if he sees like the single tear come down his father's cheek, because this is such a catastrophic event, and he never sees his father being upset about anything, because the elves don't do that type of thing. That's made him really sober for the rest of his life. So that's a bit more of an origin thing. So that was probably the least thing. But think about the longevity, because this leads into the next point I want to make. There are beings that are walking around that have seen all this. So he is mature. He was 10 years old when this cataclysm happened. But imagine this. Let's have a look at the age. There are grey elves. I'm sure there are grey elves. Here we go. There are grey elves that can live up to 2,000 years. So they're probably around when there was dinosaurs. That's so old. 150, he was a young adult when this happened. This cat, if we were talking about a grey elf, he was just, a child. So, I made the point of longevity the other day, just what an impact it would have. But I was thinking, how does that relate to the longevity consideration? How does that relate to Siward? And I think Siward he represents a new type of man in this culture. He's a Renaissance man. He's like a Charlemagne. He attracts and encourages intellectuals to him, on a minor scale, not on a grand, like I'm a king and whatever, but on a minor scale, on a practical scale. And he's interested in this from a practical point of view. It's history and world lore and what that can do for his mission in this region. So, it's almost as if he, remember the line from George Orwell, he who controls the present controls the past. He who controls the past controls the future. And Siward's like, he thinks that same way. He thinks that if he can get information about the past, he has an insight in how to fight things in the future. So what he's going to do is he's going to gain knowledge of the world lore. So all this information that I'm starting to write down here. And what he'll do is, by doing that, he can apply it to his mission. So let's take an example. What if this hex, if he knew that this hex here was actually the stronghold of Azeroth, who was the 12th of the 13. So he was the 12th warlock of the 13 necromancers, and he lived here. And he also, from the scrolls and the old writings, he had an eye of prophecy, which could see into the future. Now, if he knew that, he would know that potentially that eye is still there, because Azeroth was attacked and destroyed in that hex, and he's got some lore that's useful. So, I know I'm rambling, but to just to get the point, I think what I want to do in this campaign is almost like start producing some world history as the same kind of mapping process that we're doing for the geography. So I'm going to have an agent to do that, and I'm going to introduce a new character because Siward's brought with him his lore master Rubicus, sage specializing in arcane lore. And what he's going to do, he's going to narrate and articulate the ancient history that is found in as we adventure across this territory. And he's I always think of the picture. I remember Gandalf in Minas Tirith, where he's poring over scrolls, and it's not like a kind of going into a library and it's all or looking up on Google and stuff. It's all like all over the place, and there's scrolls here, and there's books and tomes, and he's having to make notes, and he's there for ages trying to find out all about this ring. So it's a similar process that by pulling together information, say we find a scroll down in a dungeon, will it have, we give it to the sage and he says, yes, this ties in with this information I've got here, so this gives us more information. It actually explains the situation. So yeah, I know it's I have definitely talked too much on the subject just now. I just thought it was an interesting idea, and it was sparked by that that catastrophic event that we managed to describe. And I think that's quite a nice way to give us a bit of history. We might have to, if there's people running around at 2,000 years old, we might have to go a bit further back. But I think 170 is fine just now. Okay, I think that's enough for me to go through today. We'll come back to this this checklist and see whether we can do the inn and the encumbrance. And then I'll explain things like the weather and almost like the process for encounters and how we go through encounters, and actually do some physical role playing, because it'd be quite nice to demonstrate how the reaction table works and how it interacts. And I know some people use these oracles and whatever. I don't really want to do that. I'd rather just try and use everything in the book if possible, if we can get away with it. Okay. That's enough for today then. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.